Welcome aboard, Giants fans, to episode 76 of Talk is Cheap, our New York Giants podcast right here on NJ.com. I'm Joe Giglio, joined as always by James Cratch and Dan Duggan. They cover the Giants for NJ Advanced Media. They were at MetLife Stadium on Sunday night to watch the Giants win a big game, one of the biggest the Giants have won in a long time, 10-7 in a low-scoring affair to beat the Dallas Cowboys for the second time this season. The Giants now 9-4 and in great position to at least grab a wild card spot in the NFC. James, we start with you. We didn't know what to expect going into this one except some weather, but the one thing that is becoming, and has become a long time ago, I guess, evident about the New York Giants this season is every week that defense comes to play, and it was something to watch. I mean, that was a dominant effort on Sunday night.
Definitely. I think – I don't want to say the defense's performance this season has been overblown, but I thought that they didn't play a bunch of really good teams, and when they played teams like the Packers or the Steelers, they were giving up a bunch of big plays. I don't think they played particularly well last weekend, but there's no real flaws you can find with this performance on Sunday night. They took an offense that was one of the NFL's best, and they completely shut them down. Dominant performance, brilliant defensive performance. That was what a top 5 defense in the league is supposed to look like, and the Giants looked like that on Sunday night.
They did. It was an incredible performance to do that and do it again against the Cowboys. An offense, Dan, that all year long, when they don't play the Giants, they average about 28 points a game. In the 2 games they played the Giants, they scored 19 in week 1. They scored 7 on Sunday night. It's just when the Cowboys play the Giants, they just can't move the football.
Yeah, and let's not forget that they were missing JPP. And I think a lot of people understandably thought that would be, a big absence to overcome. And Romeo Okwara, undrafted free agent, steps in and, plays. I wouldn't say he's JPP level, but I mean, he had a heck of an impact on that game. And again, for a guy who we didn't really even know who was going to start, and he ends up playing, I think it was 60 out of 66 snaps. So he certainly impressed the coaches and really rose to the occasion. I think one thing I'll say is that the Giants certainly match up well with the Cowboys. And I think, I picked the Cowboys to win the game last night just because I thought the Giants' offense would be bad. I was right. I just underestimated the Giants' defense. But they do match up well because the Cowboys want to, play downhill and run smash mouth football. But when you have Damon Harrison and Jonathan Hankins in the middle of the defense, that kind of negates the Cowboys' biggest strength. And you saw last night, Ezekiel Elliott still had a good game, but he wasn't able to go off. And they were able to make Dak Prescott look like a rookie. I mean, this secondary, Janoris Jenkins, I mean, for a guy who people were questioning if he was worth the big contract this offseason, I mean, he might want to raise because he has been phenomenal. I mean, Des Bryant, I think he had 2 catches for 18 yards in the 2 matchups against him. And obviously, the only catch last night turned into a fumble. So just hats off to the defense. I mean, it's just an amazing performance to go out and do this, especially against the team, as you listed all the accolades the Cowboys had coming in.
Yeah, and I think Jenkins has played at an all-pro level. It feels like week after week, James, he just matches up with whoever the Giants ask him to match up with. He dominates that wide receiver. And then when you have a first-round pick, a number 10 overall pick in Eli Apple coming into his own the last few weeks and starting to play really well and showing why the Giants maybe weren't crazy to take him, as high as they did. And then you have a guy like DRC, who everyone kind of forgets about, and just playing his role and doing whatever they ask him. When you can rush the passer and you have a good defensive line and you can cover, there's few things that offenses can do that you're not ready for. I mean, the defense is really I think it's more well built than we maybe gave it credit before the start of the season. Would you say that?
I definitely think so. I think maybe it's more well built than we were giving him credit for a week ago. Obviously JPP, I thought that was going to have a major impact in the game. And look, it's just one game. Romeo Okwara had a tremendous night. I think everyone talks about, Jerry Reese should get credit for, signing Snacks and Jenkins and Vernon, and he should, but at the same time, that was just opening the checkbook to guys who have proven they can play in the NFL. I think if you want to truly give Jerry Reese credit for something, look at the two leading tacklers for the Giants on Sunday night were an undrafted rookie that he plucked out of Notre Dame after the draft, and Devon Kennard, a 5th-round pick 3 years ago, who finally is healthy and kind of coming into his own as well. So I think that's where you should give Reese credit for. I mean, that he got those 2 guys. Those are things those type of low-round, undrafted guys is what the Giants haven't had recently, and that's one of the reasons why they had these struggles before this year, obviously. No, I think that my big takeaway from Sunday night was the offense is not very good. I'm sure we'll discuss the offense in depth in a second. But if the defense can play like that, and I don't mean that dominant performance, but if they can be a team that pretty much is going to hold opponents to somewhere around 10 to 24 points on a given week, maybe the Giants have to start kind of adjusting their offense to complement their defense and say, okay, our goal is to go out there and win games 17-14 every week. Because I think the Giants offense can do that, especially when you have Odell Beckham who just can turn out on a dime and take a 5-yard slant into an 80-yard touchdown. So I'm almost starting to think maybe the Giants have to say our mentality has to be defense first and we're going to win ugly. Because I think winning ugly, I mean, a win's a win, but if your strategy is to win ugly, I think it's a little bit more appetizing than it originally would look if you're just winning every week, gutting it out.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. We could definitely get into that when we talk about the offense and their issues right now and the good and the bad with them. Dan, you made the point about the defense a few minutes ago and matching up well with the Cowboys. I thought one of the reasons that they've matched up well is the way and the position Steve Spagnuolo has put them in. It feels like we don't talk about Spagnuolo much. I mean, last year it was, well, he doesn't have any players. What is he supposed to do? This year it's, well, he has players now. The defense will be naturally better. It's almost like he's gotten forgotten in the conversation, the defensive coordinator. I thought he did a good job of picking his spots on Sunday night of when to blitz and what to do. But there was always a debate about Spags, Dan, in terms of when he had players, the Giants defense won a Super Bowl. When he didn't, he was exposed as a coach. Looks like he has players again, and his defense is playing well again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's uncommon among coaches. I mean, you put good players out there, all the X's and O's start to look a little bit better. I mean, obviously the guy can coach. I mean, but yeah, you give him talent, and you go from the 32nd defense to I think they're 7th in scoring right now. So that's certainly not a coincidence, but he definitely deserves credit. I mean, Pro Football Focus had a stat that they blitzed Dak 25% in week 1, and it was up to 37% last night. So he certainly changed things up. Dak Prescott never looked comfortable for a kid who has been praised, rightfully so, for his poise. He was very skittish. There was constantly pressure on him, whether it was the front four, whether it was pressure. Obviously, the coverage had a lot to do with it. I just thought it was a great job by Spags because, again, it just mixed it up. It's kind of the opposite of the offense, which I feel like just bangs his head against the wall all day. I don't feel like the Cowboys knew what they were getting. I think that they did a good job mixing things up. You had Devon Kennard playing linebacker, playing defensive end, playing defensive tackle. You had a guy, Eric Pinkins, who most fans probably never heard of. He comes in and he blitzes and he hits Dak. And I think it was a 3rd down and completion or something like that. So just bottom line is it's different people stepping up, playing different roles. And I think, Spags certainly has the horses this year, but definitely have to tip your hat because I think he's had some really good game plans. I think he's been aggressive in the right spots. I mean, think of how many games this team has won, in the last series, having to close out a game, and he seems to kind of dial up, the right packages in those situations. So, he certainly deserves a game ball, in my opinion, for the way his unit performed last night, again, without JPP.
It was tremendous. Yeah, especially without a guy like that. Go ahead, James.
I was just going to say, obviously Spags interviewed for the Giants head coaching job. Obviously McAdoo got it. And when I think it was rookie minicamp when he spoke for the first time after the staff was set, he said, it's still his goal, his dream to be a head coach again in the NFL. And I think a lot of people kind of wrote snarky, stories about that and kind of made fun of that. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a hot head coaching candidate after this season. But if this defense, keeps playing this well, he finishes the season strong, however that finishes, and they do it again next year. And look, I think this defense has the ability to be even better next year when you consider that they're going to have Darian Thompson back, they hope, as a true center fielder at free safety. And I would assume they're going to add some talent, whether it be pass rusher or linebacker. I think obviously the defensive line, you have some free agents, so that's the question. But I really think Steve Spagnuolo might actually, he might be on the road to getting a second shot as a head coach someday. This is a major redemption year for him after the struggles of last year and the disaster he had in New Orleans. And I think he's on that path now. I mean, it's still a ways to go, but I don't think that is such a ridiculous idea as it maybe seemed back in the spring.
I don't think it is either. I mean, anytime a guy has success as a coordinator, he gets popped up back on the radar. If the Giants go on a run, it definitely could be a thing here. Let's go back to the idea of the Giants having the Cowboys number for right now and for this year, because I think that and NBC finished their coverage of the Sunday night game with that idea and how the Cowboys should fear the Giants. And Naturally, you look forward here. The Giants are very close to clinching something. They could possibly do it in Week 15. If the Giants do finish this up and get in, logic would dictate they, one win away from possibly going to Dallas in the second round of the playoffs. Now, it doesn't mean they would. Who knows what happens in the other matchup? But that matchup and that possibility is certainly out there. Dan, if the Giants go to Dallas in the second round of the playoffs, it would mean they'd have to win a playoff game somewhere else first. But if we get there, I think Giants fans are going to feel good that they're going to win the football game. It's tough to beat a team 3 times, but from what you've seen in these 2 matchups, do you think this matchup thing really, it's the difference between these teams right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm if you want to start like ranking opponents you want to see / don't want to see, I mean, the Cowboys would probably be toward the top of the list of teams you wouldn't be afraid of. Obviously 2 wins has a way of doing that. But again, like I said, just from the X's and O's standpoint, the Cowboys' strength on offense matches up well with the Giants' strength on defense. Now, the Giants will have to figure something out offensively. I can't imagine they're going to hold this team to 7 points if they were to meet again. And the Cowboys' defense was, pretty much every bit as impressive as the Giants last night, except they just don't have Odell Beckham Jr., and that was the difference on that one play. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd be much more afraid of a team like the Packers or the Falcons with a little bit more of a dynamic passing game, a little more of a dynamic offense. Whereas, again, the Cowboys, they kind of want to line up and run it down your throats. And again, when you have Damon Harrison in the middle of your defensive line, it's difficult to do that. But I mean, obviously getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. But guys on both teams were saying that they're looking forward to the chance for a third game. So I mean, I think everyone would sign up for that, including obviously the TV network. So hopefully it comes to that point.
Yeah, Fox would certainly not be upset if we get that Sunday 4:00 window of the divisional weekend at this Giants at the Cowboys. When you watch the games, the 2 of them so far, James, this year, when you watch Dak Prescott, because all the story this year has been about Dak Prescott, it's been about Ezekiel Elliott. Elliott has done, last night he was okay, wasn't great, but he was pretty good, as he always is. But the Giants really they've shut down Dak Prescott. I mean, he's looked like a rookie in those games. You look at his numbers in the other games he's played, he hasn't looked like a rookie.
I think I said this before, but when the Giants played the Cowboys in Week 1, my takeaway, I think I said on the podcast, was, Dak can keep them 500, but I didn't really think that he was going to be able to give them a chance to win. I figured they have to go back to Romo. I'm not ready to quite say I was right about that, but he looked shaky last night. And, Jerry Jones shot down the Romo speculation pretty quickly and pretty firmly after the game, but look, the Cowboys, I think their next 2 games are the Bucs and the Lions. So I really think there's a chance, especially if the Bucs are red hot next week, Sunday Night Football. If Dak comes out flat in the first half next week, I really think that we're going to see Tony Romo come in, and I think that could do one of 2 things for the Cowboys. It could make them even better, or it could kind of kill this thing. I think the Cowboys, they're walking a really fine line here, and I think yesterday was maybe the first sign that Dak he's done great, but he's still a rookie, and I don't know if he's going to be able to get this thing to where they want it to go.
Before we move on to the Giants offense and some of the worries and some of the greatness with Beckham, I just want to throw this stat out there. If we circle back around and the 3 of us are talking about this matchup come January and Dak is still in there or he's not, but 7 of 22, 2 interceptions last night when not under pressure. That was a combination of the Giants secondary being really good, and Dak just wasn't. Dak didn't play a good game last night, and it's going to be fascinating to see how the Cowboys approach it. But for the Giants now, guys, 9-4, 3 games to go. They likely need 1 win to clinch that playoff spot, maybe a little help here or there. But 1 out of the 3 is probably going to get it done. But the worry, of course, is always a worry with the Giants. They only scored 10 points in the victory. The defense was great. But the offense, and Dan, we've been having the same variation of this conversation for 14 weeks now. The offense stunk, and Eli wasn't any good on Sunday night. The offensive line, especially Eric Flowers, was bad, and they were rescued by 1 play by Odell Beckham. And this, I thought, was even more, though, discouraging because the Cowboys' defense isn't great, and they had given up a ton of yards to the Redskins on Thanksgiving. I thought last night was a night that they might be able to move the football, and they couldn't.
Yeah, it feels like we say that every week. Like, the Browns, of course they'll get going this week, and it doesn't happen. Again, you looked at the Cowboys. This isn't a world-beating defense, and yet they hold you under 300 yards again. And it's just now it's everywhere. You wanted to blame McAdoo's play calling, and then it's Eli, and then it's the running game, it's the offensive line. Even Odell wasn't great until the 1 play where he had the 2 drops, and Victor Cruz had a drop. I mean, it just feels like I don't know how they won the game last night. Obviously, we've talked about the defense. That's how it was. But that offense was just so bad, and it's been like this for so long. It's amazing that they're 9-4 with an offense that's playing like this. And again, this isn't one of these offenses like the Ravens from back in the early 2000s where hey, they don't have any weapons and they're just trying to survive the games. Like James is saying, like maybe they should just commit to winning ugly. This shouldn't be the case when you have a guy of Eli's pedigree, a game changer like Odell. And yet that's kind of where they're at right now. It's hard to see it changing at this point again, because I know it's, people keep saying, oh, well, maybe it'll click. I mean, we're 13 games in, kind of how you are. And again, credit to them that they're 9-4 despite this offense, but it's kind of dicey to go into the playoffs thinking that, this offense is going to be good enough to make a serious run. Then again, they keep finding a way. So I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss. I mean, it's surprising to me, and yet it's not, that they just can't figure out a way to get anything going. McAdoo is really searching for positives to credit the amount of rushing attempts they had last night when, you averaged 3 yards a carry. I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing that you're running the ball so much. So, even at the end of the game, clearly didn't trust, putting the ball in Eli's hands. They just were content to run it into the line 3 times and just punt it away. I don't know. The offense is definitely a big concern, but it's a little easier to stomach after a win, of course.
It is. This conversation would be totally different if the Giants' defense was even average, because they'd be in big trouble and we'd be focusing so much on the offense. James, before we touch on Odell and just the ability to just change everything on a dime, Dan mentioned Eli there, and you look at some of the numbers, and I never thought Eli's the kind of quarterback you should evaluate solely on numbers, because I don't think it gives the full picture of what he is as a quarterback, but they're not very good this year compared to the last couple of years under Ben McAdoo. How much this is on Eli? He turned the football over 4 times last night, the interception, or 3 times, the interception and the 2 lost fumbles. How much of this is on Eli and the way he's played?
I think, look, the quarterback's always going to get a lot of credit or a lot of blame. I think there's a significant amount of this is on Eli because we said this before, the offensive line, it struggles, and Eric Flowers was really bad in the first half last night. I didn't think Bobby Hart played all that well either, especially early on, but it's pretty much the same line they had last year. The tight ends aren't great, but the tight ends weren't great last year. The backs are pretty much the same. The receivers, I think, are better because they didn't have Shepard. They didn't have Cruz. Eli's not playing well, and I think that a lot of people, obviously you'll see on social media and emails to us, like the Eli defenders will come out and they'll blame it on the drops or the offensive line or this or that. But the bottom line is Eli Manning hasn't played well. I don't think he's been awful, but I don't think he's been as good as anyone expected him to be this year, be going to his 3rd year in the offense. And some of those throws last night that he got away with that were dropped or hit the ground or whatever, they were god-awful. I don't know what he was thinking on some of those throws. And I know, Mac said, we'll go look at the film. They're going to go look at the film, and I think they're going to be scratching their heads because it just didn't make sense. I don't know what it is. There's something not right with this offense, and maybe we'll never figure out what it is. But Dan's right. They're 13 games in. This is not going to click. They just got to figure out a way to get this to be somewhat serviceable. And I don't even know if they can do that. They won. That's great. Everyone's going to be excited. They beat the Cowboys. No one should take that away from them. Biggest wins in the Super Bowl, biggest win of the year. But this offense is just not good.
It's not. No, I think that's the best way to put it. The one saving grace they have, Dan, and we seemingly come back to him every time we want to totally bury the offense, and you can't because once in a while, Odell Beckham Jr. he'll make an Odell Beckham Jr. play. And last night, takes the pass from Eli, runs 61 yards, and it's just amazing to watch this guy and his physical ability. Like, he's a track star wearing a helmet out there. Like, that was crazy. Like, it looked like the defensive back from the Cowboys was going to catch him, and then it just like he takes it to another gear and he's gone.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's gotten to the point where it's almost like a baseball player when he comes up, you're expecting a home run. With him, you expect him to just make a play like that. He catches a ball 5 or 6 yards, down the field last night on that slant, and I'm saying he's gone. You can see it. You can just you start to realize the angles for him are different than everybody else. Most people catch that ball and pretty much tackled, right after. And the Cowboys cornerback actually had the angle, and he just kind of saw it was amazing to see Odell just gain separation as they both, world-class athletes sprinting down the field. And it was like Usain Bolt. He just somehow, outruns a guy who has the angle on him who also has great speed. So, I mean, it's amazing to see. I mean, it's obviously such a weapon. Again, these are slant passes. These are supposed to, move the chains, and every time he catches one, he's a threat to take it to the house. I mean, there's not many guys, if any, in the NFL who can do that. So that's one of those things where, I think last week we were, comparing him to Antonio Brown, and all these different great receivers kind of bring different things to the table. I think that's the thing that Odell has over anybody. Just the ability to catch, a routine ball and just outrun everybody. I'm constantly amazed. Even, I think he ran a 4.4 40 at the combine, but he's one of these guys who his playing speed is even faster than that because, like you said, it's like a track star out there. He doesn't lose any speed when he puts the pads on and when he's in the game. I mean, it's just really amazing to sit back and watch this guy outrun, the other team's fastest players and gain 5 yards on a 50-yard run. It's really impressive and such a huge weapon.
It is incredible. And James, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that the Giants' offense compared to the defense, maybe how they should play things, down the stretch to try to maximize what they have. And no, I mean, we're not talking about an all-time great defense. We're talking about one that's playing well right now. I mean, do you think there's a formula there? I'm not sure how it would even look in terms of game calling or game planning, but to try to just play the sound defense like you were mentioning, and then try to win a game like they did last night, win games with a Beckham catch or two. I mean, if you were to kind of draw that up, I mean, how would Ben McAdoo go about doing that to maximize the team he has right now?
I think one thing that, and I don't think he's going to do this because it's not in his nature from what we've seen, is that, the fourth down stuff is great, and I understand he's aggressive, but I go back to the sequence. Now, a lot of people would disagree with press box. The sequence where they got the fourth down and then Eli turned it over on the fumble, I would have kicked the field goal there. I think it was like a 49, 50-yard try for Robbie Gould. I would have attempted that field goal. I also think that when you get to a fourth down, around midfield, maybe you don't go for that. Maybe you let Brad Wing, who's been excellent the past few weeks, try to pin teams down deep. I think that might be the way to go. You kind of pull back on the fourth down aggressiveness, take your 3 points when it's there, take your punts and try to pin them deep. I mean, those are two things I can think of off the top of my head. It's tough though, because if you had a strong or competent run game, I think it'd be a lot easier to say, okay, we're going to try to complement the defense and play field position and be smart, but they don't have that. So the biggest thing I can think of is that maybe pull back on the fourth down stuff, kick the field goals when they're there, try them when they're there, use Wing as a weapon, punt's not a bad thing, and then maybe go from there.
I gotta just jump in and disagree only for the fact that they were 2 for 2 on fourth down last night. I get what you're saying. I don't know how you can. I don't know if you want to start game planning that way. I mean, A, the defense, I don't know if they're that good, and B, I mean, you still got to score some points. So I don't know if you want to totally kind of go into a shell. I mean, you have Odell Beckham, you have Eli Manning. I think the bigger thing Ben McAdoo should be doing is trying to figure out a way to actually use these weapons in an effective manner. I mean, I don't think that they need to play scared. Again, I mean, I think the fourth down stuff, I understand what you're saying a little bit, but I think that they, you need to score some points. I mean, you can't count on the defense holding opponents to 7 points. So yeah, I think if I'm Ben McAdoo, I'm not saying ramp up the aggressiveness, but man, you gotta figure something out, because again, we're talking about this weapon they have that not many teams have. So you should be finding ways to get him the ball as much as possible. And it's been tough to watch this offense, but I don't know if just kind of sitting back, because again, you said they don't have a running game, so it's kind of tough. I mean, stop punting on third down maybe. I don't know what they can do to really put this defense in more of a spot to win games, because just them going out and doing what they do. I mean, obviously the turnovers are killers, but they had about 6 3-and-outs last night, so they're certainly putting a lot on the defense as it is. I don't know if I want to be any more conservative and ask them to do even more, but just my 2 cents on that one.
You could put Odell in the Wildcat.
Worth the shot, maybe.
Yeah, worth the shot. I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, just, do something, because I think that, I just feel like we're going to be probably having the same conversation on next week's podcast. That either they beat the Lions or they lose a close game to the Lions, and it's good. Well, the defense played really well, and the offense did this, and Odell had this brilliant play, and then they didn't do anything. I mean, I feel like at some point, I understand that they're not going to blow up the offense, because it's not like completely non-functioning. It's just not functioning well. But I just think I agree with you. I don't think this is a great like a dominant all-time defense. But at some point, they're going to make the playoffs, barring an epic collapse. They want to at least have a representative effort and outing and showing in the playoffs. So you got to do something, and I think at this point that might be their best option to try to cater to the defense and just kind of make sure the offense doesn't totally screw it up.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, Ben McAdoo obviously has a philosophy, and he has an offense that has worked for him. But at some point here, what do you have to do just to try to win the games you have in front of you, especially when you get to January and you have yourself a real chance to do some damage in an NFC that looks wide open, especially when you've taken down the team that is going to be the number one seed. I mean, there's a real chance for them there. Let's talk about Eric Flowers for a second. I know you guys were obviously at the game, covering the game. Not sure if you had a chance to watch the replay yet or the film and look at it that way. But I was watching it on NBC, and Chris Collinsworth was, and he's usually, I think, more of a defense. He defends the players more when they're struggling than throws them under the bus for their technique or the way they're struggling. He's real about it, but he's not usually blasting a guy. I thought he was. I mean, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, that Eric Flowers' technique is awful, and he really rarely sees a left tackle that lost in terms of technique and how he's blocking. But that's the way he was describing Flowers in that first half. Dan, how big of an issue is he in all of these conversations we have, and the offensive line in general? But Flowers, supposed to be the anchor at left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue. I mean, when, kind of amateurs like myself can look and just see that, that technique does not look good. You don't even need Chris Collinsworth to say that the whole letting the guy run around you, ducking your head and reaching out for him is not exactly what you want to see out of your first round pick left tackle. I wrote last week that in that Steelers game, I feel like his struggles were probably the single biggest detriment to the offense. Last night in the first half, there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, he had the big one where he, lets the guy just blow right by him. And it's magnified because you're on the blind side. Obviously that's Eli Manning needs to have some faith in that guy back there because, it's the blind side. You can't see him coming. So when you get beat there, something really bad happens, like a strip sack. It's not like Eli can throw it away. It's not like Eli can just take a sack when he doesn't know it's coming. And the guy gets off the line that quickly and that cleanly. That's just a huge, blown assignment, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a tough thing to overcome. I mean, it's the point where people are calling for Will Beatty, who again 13 games in, they really have shown no faith in playing him. I don't know. I mean, I was at the point last night where I thought maybe for a series, I think you got to almost as a disciplinary measure, like Flowers. It's because if it's technique, it's not like the guy can't play. Again, he's a first round pick. He has the size. He has the ability. You got to be just kind of check him a little bit. Like, you got to pick it up because I don't know how much you can attribute Eli's struggles to that, but I can't say I blame Eli if you're a little skittish. If you don't trust your left tackle, very tough to play quarterback in this league, and Flowers certainly hasn't earned his trust. So I think it's a major concern. He quieted down in the second half. I don't recall any kind of egregious errors by him in the second half, but it just seems like once a week he's good for either a sack, a crucial holding penalty. Sometimes you get both. It's a major concern. I don't think it's something they really can address at this point in the season. Again, if they don't trust Beatty, there's really no other options there unless you want to really get crazy and put Justin Pugh there when he gets back, which I don't think they'll do. It's been a concern. Going back to last season, I know that's the thing that people kind of killed Jerry Reese on the most, that he didn't upgrade that position. And frankly, it's a fair criticism because he had made some progress early in the season, but it seems like he's kind of back to square one, and it does not look like the left tackle of the future, in my opinion.
No, he doesn't, and they drafted him to be one. When you take a guy that high, you're hoping you get a left tackle. It doesn't look like they have one that's going to be a good one, let alone a great one. James, your thoughts on the line, and just is that something that Ben and Eli can't overcome this year? That those guys are probably going to be the same five when we get to the first week of January they are now.
Can't overcome. Look, this is the line. It's not going to get any better. I shouldn't say it. I think Pugh will help it, obviously, when they get Justin Pugh back. But, that can be a sizable – this line is not all of a sudden going to click and become a dominant force down the stretch. And with Flowers, I wrote this last week, but the Giants are really kind of in a bad spot here because they drafted Flowers number 9 overall to be their left tackle. I thought that people who – I understand why Jerry Reese didn't want to move him to the right side this past offseason, because the way I think the Giants looked at it was, well, we expected he would play right tackle his rookie year, then move over. And obviously Beatty's injury forced him to play left tackle. He struggled, but no duh, he's a rookie. Of course he's going to struggle. I think they expected him to make sufficient progress with new line coach this year. and be fine. He's not fine. And I think fans say, oh, move him to the right side. Well, okay. One, I mean, it's a technique issue. I mean, his techniques should be just as bad on the right side, you would presume, on the left side. And two, they're in a position now where they desperately need him to somehow work at left tackle, because the chance to bring in a veteran like Russell Okung or Daniel Donald Penn, that's passed. You look at the free agent market coming up this spring, no one's really out there. You're going to have Andrew Whitworth, who's 34 years old and probably will just go back to Cincinnati, or you're going to have Matt Khalil from Minnesota, who's coming off hip surgery. The tackle draft, not very good this year. So, and do the Giants really want to spend another, high round pick on an offensive lineman? Or do they want to trade that to Cleveland for Joe Thomas or San Francisco for Joe Staley? I mean, I just feel like if Flowers goes to the right side, he might work out there, but it's going to throw the Giants' entire offseason building plan kind of off schedule, because they're going to have to sacrifice getting a tight end or a running back or a linebacker or another pass rusher potentially, because they have to go invest a first, second round pick in drafting a tackle in a tackle light draft, or trading for a tackle, or they might have to spend money and overpay on the free agent market to get a guy who maybe isn't necessarily a great fit to begin with. So they need Flowers to get going now, because they got to keep Eli upright and they got to try to win. But going to the future, because if Flowers doesn't pan out or they have to move the right tackle, even if that works, you don't draft right tackles number 9 overall. And I think it's going to become a knock on Jerry Reese's resume. Now, he's doing a lot. He's done a lot of good recently, so I don't think it's as bad as it would have been a year ago. But the Flowers thing, they desperately need this to work out. And right now, I think you really have to – they're going to have to face the facts at the end of the year, and they're probably maybe going to have to seriously consider moving him.
And that's a problem, right? That creates a whole ripple effect for what they're trying to do offensively. That's for tomorrow. For today, they're 9-4 with 3 games to go. Let's look ahead to Sunday, a matchup that if they win and things go their way in other games, they could possibly clinch their playoff spot before going on the road for the last 2 games of the season. Either way, they probably need one more. It could be this week against the Lions. When the schedule came out, guys, I didn't look at this as a marquee game. I mean, the Lions, they've been okay the last couple of years, nothing special. Last year, they rallied at the end. I didn't think much of them coming into the year. They're good, and right now, as we sit here, Dan, they are the number 2 seed in the NFC because the Seahawks lost on the road in Green Bay. So they're not just facing another team that's probably going to the playoffs. They're facing one that could possibly have a bye week and maybe match up with the Giants down the line. What do you think about this game? It's a fascinating matchup to me.
Yeah, I don't think anyone saw this coming out of Detroit. So, I mean, it's been quite an impressive run by them. I mean, I think one thing you can pretty much count on for this game on Sunday is it's going to come down to the last possession, because it seems like that's all these two teams both do. I mean, the Lions seem very similar. I mean, I haven't watched a ton of their games, but just the highlights you see and even just the scores you see seem very similar to the Giants in the sense that it's certainly not always pretty, but they just find a way in the fourth quarter to, just get that one score they need or get that one stop and pull out a 3-point win, a 7-point win, whatever have you. That's been their formula all season. So I think it should be a great matchup. 2 9-4 teams that have kind of got to the same point, traveling the same path. I think potentially the Giants might catch a break with Matthew Stafford. I don't know exactly. I know he has some hand injury with some torn ligaments or something. Obviously, look more into that this week. He was able to play yesterday, but certainly that's not ideal for your quarterback. But I expect a really good matchup. It'll be interesting to see because the Lions are kind of a funky offense. They really don't run the ball well. Somehow they've gotten better without Calvin Johnson and without really having, a marquee wide receiver. It's not a game where you say, Janoris Jenkins is going to go shut down the number 1 receiver. And they seem to spread the ball around really well. Defense is playing well. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup. And, obviously a game the Giants can win. And if you can get a 10-4, then you're really talking about, the ceiling for this team really goes up.
It does. And at 10-4, they might clinch. And then we're talking about a 5 seed and where they'd play and who they'd play and all that kind of thing before the final 2 games. And Stafford has, I think, a dislocation on his middle finger of his throwing hand. So he'll be wearing a glove, kind of like Kurt Warner did late in his career. James, when you look at this game and this matchup, one that we could see again in January, what are your early thoughts on it?
I think it's a really intriguing game. I think it's I don't want to say it's a must-win for the Giants, but I think that if you get to 10-4, then you really – we've said this since the beginning of the year. At Philly on a short week, at Washington, that's a really tough way to end the year. And I think that if you go into that 2-game stretch with 10 wins, there's a very good chance that even if disaster strikes and the Giants lose both games, they're going to get help on the back end elsewhere to get into the playoffs. I'm really fascinated to see Stafford. He's getting all this, MVP buzz. I want to see how he does, especially now that the injury's in play. The Lions defense has been kind of up and down. They have some pass rushes, but they've also struggled this year. And I just think on the whole, I think the Lions have quietly been one of the league's more talented teams the past few years. I know Jim Caldwell gets a lot of heat, but his teams are basically always kind of in the playoff mix in his career. So I'm intrigued to see this team because I think this is a team, especially since they're number 2 seed now in the NFC at this time, they could be a dangerous team. I think, the idea of the Lions being a Super Bowl sleeper is not too out there at this point, especially if they're going to have some home field advantage to them. So I'm really just intrigued to see this Detroit team up close and see how the Giants match up with them. Because you're right, this very well could be the first-round matchup we see.
It could. And, yeah, I agree with you. Caldwell doesn't get enough credit. He's not a bad coach, not a great one, but he also took over that Ravens offense when they went on that run to win the Super Bowl, and he was coordinating that thing. So he's pretty good. It should be a good matchup. Caldwell's offense, Stafford against this Giants defense. Guys, it was a fun game on Sunday night. You guys were there. And obviously, you'll be there down the stretch here as the Giants look like they're heading towards a rebirth in the postseason. James, as always, thanks for doing this.
You got it, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Thanks to all of you for listening to episode 76 of Talk is Cheap. We'll be back next week to talk about the Giants, possibly with 10 wins, possibly already clinching a playoff berth. Everyone have a great week. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can listen to ours and subscribe. And, of course, leave us a rating on iTunes. It helps the show grow. We'll be back next week right here on NJ.com.